Okay, just a little bit about a history of the ruling. It goes back some time. It actually goes back to Sean McCoy's time, which was I was involved in EXSA from 1999. So this VAT exemption has been around for a long time. So that was Sean McCoy's time. In 2005, Andrew Dunkley, who was our then treasurer, and there's actually a road named after him at Gallagher Estates. I don't know if it's still there, but Andrew Dunkley was our treasurer in 2005, and he actually got the ruling in 2005. So that was the next time of the ruling. Then G. Badenhorst who was our accountant, got a ruling in 2010. And then 2012, Nigel Walker got a 3-year ruling. Nigel, I see you've just joined us. Welcome. Nice to have you here. And Nigel, I think you were treasurer at the time, or you were chairperson at the time, and you got us the ruling in 2012. 2015, Sue Gannon got us another 3 years. And then in 2018, Moses Nefali, our treasurer, and actually our financial director at Scasn, got a ruling for another 5 years. So the current ruling is from 2018 to 2023. And obviously we just need to watch the dates. And I know, Doug, you drove the process last time, just to make sure that we do apply quite early. So it's not a thing, you know, we almost we applied and it took us 6 months to do the application. So it's not a thing you want to let it run out and then actually make the application. So it is 2018, 5 years is 2019, 2020, 21, 22, 23. But I do recommend that we start looking, end of this year, to start looking at getting another directive going forward, because it does make a massive difference, and I will cover that just now. I think just a couple of things, and this is the sort of terms and conditions. We're all used to those terms and conditions. Firstly, I'm not a consultant, even though sometimes people think I am. Hey, to me, Sue, hey, I'm not a psychologist, as you know. I'm not an expert, and I put there with the one eye, in the land of the blind, the one eye is king. So, often, so I'm not an expert in this. I know a lot about it, but I'm not an expert. So I do ask that if there are any real technical queries you've got, I think it would be good to ask your accountant in terms of looking at the ruling. I mean, I just saw Derek Green coming in, and I was thinking about registration services. Is that exempt or not? I don't know. You would obviously have to read the ruling and decide for yourself. I would say it probably is, but you need to check for that. And the last thing is I can't be held responsible. So I don't want some sort of litigation case against me because, oh, Justin from EXSA said, from the EXSA talk, excuse me. Sorry. Okay. So Justin from the...
Bless you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Everybody's just run out of the room because of COVID. Come back to me. Come back, Sue. It's not so bad. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that, and we don't want to have a situation that somebody says, oh, you said this. So, but I'm welcome to, give some opinions on it, but it's not a legal binding opinion, and it's just really some dipstick opinion. I think what's important, what do we do in our business? So we supply movable goods on a rental basis, which is furniture, aluminium, walls, and graphics. We also supply services, project management, transporting of stands, and design services. This ruling is very much a contractor ruling. And obviously I will cover organizers just now because it used to include organizers, but organizers are treated quite differently for space. So that's what we do in our business. And why do we need a ruling? So a ruling really helps with clarity. So if you've got a ruling, one can actually rely on it. And I'll give you an example. When Moses does his VAT return, we have quite a lot of export work. When I mean export, not overseas, but in South Africa from overseas companies. And he actually submits the directive. So there's some queries in terms of VAT and zero rating. We just submit the directive and, and explain it, obviously. But at times we've actually shown the directive. So it's very important that there's clarity and certainty. And I think with anything with taxation, this is very important. I think if you look at what's happened with the pandemic, one of the major stresses is there's been lack of certainty. Sometimes things are opening, sometimes they're closing, and it really creates a very challenging environment. I'm just going to go through the zero rating. So there's two elements. There's goods and services, and there's movable goods. So they're two different things, and they're treated, at the end of the day, they're treated the same way, but they're different ways of looking at it. So in terms of what the Act says, that where for a section, a supply of goods would be charged with tax at a zero rate, refer to section 7.1, such supply of goods shall be compliant with subsection 3 of this section, be charged with tax at a zero rate. So I will go into a bit more sort of layman terms at the end of it, but I'm just showing you what the Act actually says. So what they do is they split it into goods, which are movable goods, which are supplied under a rental agreement. So you can't claim this. If you're selling your client a TV, you've got to charge VAT. So it's a rental basis that are being used by the lessee. So they've got to be used. So you can't go and rent somebody and then they give it to somebody else. So they can't be an agent. And it's the concern is in an export country. So it can't be a company which is registered in South Africa, but has got a branch overseas. In that case, it's not actually conducted in an export country. Payment of rent or other consideration of the agreement is affected. So the payment must come from an export country. Now, that doesn't mean that if you get paid in rands and somebody goes from the UK and they go to the bank and they pay you in rands, that payment is still from an export country, even though it's rands. So it's important that so it's not the payment must originate from an export country. So someone in Dubai goes and buys rands in Dubai from the bank and pays you in rands, and all the other criteria apply, it will be zero rated. So it doesn't mean it has to be foreign currency, as long as the currency it originates from overseas. Expanding. Okay, so there's no VAT on goods if it's movable goods, rental agreement, goods used by that lessee. The concern is conducted in an export country, and the payment of rent or other consideration is effected from such export company. So let's just go through that. So movable goods are things that can be moved around. So you can't go and say immovable is like land, that kind of stuff is immovable. So I think that's quite simple. Rental agreement, I said it can't be a sale. So you can't sell a furniture, for instance, and sell to the client, oh, listen, we're going to supply furniture to your stand, but you can keep the furniture afterwards. That's not the case. That doesn't count. So that would be VATable. Goods used by the lessee, I spoke about that. So you can't go and contract with the lessee and then they actually give it to somebody else who uses it. So you've got to make sure that that person who's actually you contracting with actually uses it on the stand. Concern conducted in export country. So that's where the enterprise is based. So now you will have a situation where, for instance, let's take an example like Microsoft. Microsoft might have a branch in South Africa and they might have a branch in America. Let's say they're doing an international roadshow. Or not a branch, a company. Let's just get away from branch. Branch is a close association. So I'll say that again. So you've got Microsoft that has a company based in South Africa, and you've got Microsoft that's based in the USA, Microsoft head office. Microsoft head office do a roadshow to South Africa, for instance, and they decide to have an exhibition stand or an exhibition event. The stands that are provided from overseas, in terms of that overseas brief, would be VAT exempt. Sorry, zero rated. They would be zero rated because the company is based in America. So in terms of tax, one always looks at the narrow definition. So even though there's a Microsoft in South Africa, you've been briefed from overseas. It's a rental agreement. The goods are used by Microsoft overseas in their event in South Africa. And the concern is based in America. And the payment is effected from America. So if the first three things apply, but the payment comes from Microsoft South Africa, you've got a problem. Then it's VATable. Okay, so you just need to make sure, and that does happen. That does happen where you'll have the payment which is affected from a South African bank account. and that is then vatable. So it's very important that you make sure that in that case, with the Microsoft example, that the payment comes from the USA. It can be in rands as long as those rands are bought in America. So that's the VAT on, no VAT on goods. I think it's also very important that, and just going through, although the movable goods are supplied under a rental agreement which is zero rated, firstly, the goods must be used for that foreign enterprise's commercial enterprise. Secondly, this enterprise should be conducted exclusively offshore. So if Microsoft's head office is only in America, but they've also got an operation in South Africa under the same overseas company, then it would actually be vatable. I see, Nigel, you've raised your hand. You want to put a question in now? I don't mind answering it now.
Hang on. Yes, please, Justin. On that point, that previous slide,
yes,
and I don't have the current ruling in front of me, so I'm not querying it. I'm just would like to raise a question.
Yeah.
The previous slide, you said if Microsoft, the original rulings always referred to that the international company couldn't be, I'm going to say, represented in South Africa. Therefore, and I used the case of BMW, you've used Microsoft. So BMW Germany, you have a BMW here, although they're separate companies, entities, legal, etc., it raised too many opportunities to for the invoicing to come from overseas, and yet there would be another arrangement made between the two entities to avoid tax. We've never applied it where it's the companies represented in this country. KPMG they're all totally separate companies, but as far as I used to read the ruling, they would not be eligible because they're represented in this country.
So, so Nigel, this is and like I say, I'm not an expert on it.
Yeah,
but from my understanding says, secondly, this foreign enterprise should be conducted exclusively offshore. So what they're saying is that if you got a brief from BMW South Africa and overseas was paying it, they would be vatable. But if the brief was from overseas, right, that means that enterprise is operating overseas. So for me, it depends on what actually happens with the actual job. So if it's briefed from overseas involvement, it's a foreign enterprise. I mean, like for Microsoft example, they'll have an international roadshow. It's driven by overseas. People will come from overseas. They'll come for that. So I think it's important, from my understanding, it's very important to see the process, how it actually works out in terms of the specific job.
Okay, I agree, and I don't want to extend, it's not a discussion, because I think the VAT ruling is one of the pillars of EXSA, but I would just raise a flag. For example, if you then had meetings at Microsoft South Africa in Joburg, and the project team was down there, I think you would be exposed.
I agree. So if it was,
so I just using that word.
So if it was Microsoft South Africa, but everything was based from South Africa, but the payment came from overseas, for me that would be vatable because the enterprise that's briefing you is in South Africa. So it's just very important to see how the origination of the brief happens. But we haven't had any case law on this, Nigel, and there's not, it's a debatable point. But I think in terms of this ruling, you'd be okay, because you would say that the enterprise was actually, in that case, was in South Africa. They weren't foreign based because they were briefing you from South Africa and they had a South African operation. But if it's like, and I mentioned Microsoft, I mean, we've actually done a brief for Microsoft, which was an international brief, nothing to do with the South African office. The South African people just rocked up and they had a stand there, of which we charged them VAT for, because they just rocked up as an entity there. So I think that's how it would actually roll out. But one needs to see.
But I think in the car manufacturer, for example, that's I just think it's because VAT is obviously 15%, and if the VAT ruling was rejected,
yes,
and you hadn't charged VAT, you are still liable.
Absolutely.
I don't
Absolutely. So there's
like
agreed.
the thought of going back to the client and asking for 15% extra.
Sure. So like in any of this sort of thing, Nigel, there is a risk. What I would do in that case is talk to your tax advisor and also look at the definition of enterprise, what the definition of enterprise is. And maybe a car manufacturer, there's a greater connection with BMW South Africa because they've got a production facility here, and compared to an example, other examples out there. So I think one just needs to be very careful in terms of this process. Okay. Then finally, documentary proof, which I will chat about just now in terms of what documentary proof is needed. Okay, documentary proof to substantiate a vendor applying the zero rate. Documentary proof would be a tax invoice, which is very important, and proof of payment. So the proof of payment is very important, that the proof of payment shows that it's from overseas, even though it is in rand. So that documentary proof is important. And obviously, one just needs to be careful that one doesn't say chairs and the SARS then look at it as a sale. So it must be rental of chairs or rental of stands. So I think rentals, the word rental is a very important word when doing those stands. So you just got to be very careful that you don't land up in a situation that SARS question that it's actually a sale. So I think it's very important that the wording one uses in these invoices is important. What the VAT Act says, so I've spoken about goods, I'm going to chat about services. So this would be, other than services contemplated in 11.2, that our electronic service would be charged for VAT at the referred to in 7.1, such supply of service shall be compliant with section 3 of the section, which would be a 0%. I think what's also important is in VAT, you have VAT exempt and zero rated. This situation is zero rated, which means you can claim your input, which makes quite a big difference. So that's very important. It's not an exempt supply, it's a zero rated supply. So exempt supply, as example, interest is an exempt supply. There's no VAT on interest. Private residential accommodation is an exempt supply. Whereas the production of bread is a zero rated supply. There's no VAT, but you can claim your inputs. So it's important that you realize it's a zero rated supply. The services supplied to a person who's not a resident of the Republic, not being services which are supplied directly in connection with land or improvement. So this land situation ties in with the organizers. The organizers have to charge VAT, because in a way, when you rent space at a stand, you're actually renting the land. You're renting that space in an exhibition hall. So because you're renting that space in exhibition hall, it's in connection with land. So therefore, you have to charge that. And in connection with movable property, included in the Republic, the services, blah, blah, blah. There's quite a lot of stuff there. I think what's very important is for EXSA members, this ruling. The following services supplied to EXSA members may be zero rated insofar as the requirements 11.2 are met. So I have spoken about goods. I'm now talking about services. So I know it sounds like a bit of repetition and you think, gee, this guy's got COVID brain, what's going on? I'm just saying to you is that I've spoken about movable goods. I'm now talking about services, and I will explain the difference at the end. Arranging for the rental of exhibition space, arranging for rental of goods, decor, furniture, and these are specifically mentioned in our ruling. Designing the layout of the exhibition site, erecting the stalls, dressing and setting up the stalls. So arranging for the rental of exhibition space. So if you charged a fee to organize with the organizers, to organize rental space to be done for an overseas exhibitor, there was no VAT on that. So I don't often see that, but that's quite an interesting thing. So that's what the ruling says in terms of supply of services. I spoke a little bit earlier about organizers. Supply of exhibition space by EXSA members to foreign exhibitors is subject to VAT at a standard rate in terms of section 7.1, as there's no provision in the VAT Act which allows for it to be zero rated. So this is quite important for organizers. They have to charge VAT. because it's in a service in connection with land. So you're actually leasing that land for a week, a day or two, therefore you have to charge VAT. I don't know if it's always done by organizers. I have seen different interpretations of it, but they should be charging VAT. Under the old ruling from about, I think about 8 years back, there was an exemption for organizers. They could also be zero rated, but that changed about 8 years ago. This ruling is conditional upon the following. EXSA members must obtain and retain documents. I spoke about the documents. And EXSA needs to provide a list of the EXSA members who are registered for VAT. So I think, Leanne, this is something which you need to make sure we do. I know Moses sent you a mail about it, but it's very important that whoever we got this directive from, we just need to give them a list of who our EXSA members are. That's very important. It's part of one of the conditions. Now, I know that we've gone through COVID and nothing's happened in the last 2 years, but I think it's very important we do that. Do you want to say something, Leanne?
Yeah, thanks, Justin. Yes, we have had a discussion about it. And as soon as AGM is done, we will be sending the list through of EXSA members. Remember, a lot of people are joining EXSA still now, and a lot of renewals are still taking place. So once AGM's done and we've got our board in place, we will be sending through everything to SARS for verification, as we've done every year.
So I think it's important to maybe send it. I mean, there is an address, in that directive we've got, and I think it's important that we do it in terms of the ruling, it's every 12 months. So this ruling can only be in place if it's every 12 months.
Yeah, so we did send it last year,
okay.
And we will send
Well
it
done.
again this year.
Fantastic.
So we are keeping up with it. It's very much, this benefit to EXSA is exceptionally important, and we hold it in very high regard. So it's something we would never let slide or lose, because it would mean a great disrespect to our members. So we do take it very seriously.
Okay. Thanks, Leanne. Great that you were doing it during the pandemic. I'm just going to cover this one here, and let me just see the top of the screen. Okay. Is the taxable supply from overseas, company which operates overseas and payment from overseas and issues a VAT invoice? So this is the debate, and Nigel, thanks for that debate. We're just got to be very careful, where the taxable, where did the brief happen from? So, if it's a South African company and they're briefing and the money's coming from overseas, for me, it's VATable. But if it's overseas brief and entirely an overseas thing, and one gets that, then it's not VATable. So if it is yes, if it's no, you've got to charge VAT. So you now down the line of yes. Is it for exhibition space? Yes, you must charge VAT. So I've spoken about the organizers there. If it's no, is it for services? Yes. If it's an EXSA member, then it's no VAT. And if it's for movable goods, yes, no VAT if it's an EXSA member. What's quite interesting is that this directive covers movable goods and services. And for me, is the VAT ruling was more important for services rather than movable goods, because there are, in terms of other law in the VAT Act, if it's for movable goods, one could rely on other areas of the VAT Act that there would be no VAT. But that's, I don't think that's relevant here, because I'm talking to EXSA members. So it's very important that this is a massive benefit for EXSA, benefit of a member for EXSA, as we spoke about, Leanne, a little bit earlier, and it must be an EXSA member to use this ruling. So just to give you an idea, on 100,000 Rand stand, VAT at 15% is 15,000 Rand. If you're an EXSA member, you just can quote the 100,000. If you're a non-EXSA member, you have to then add the 15% and it'll be 115,000, which then gives a massive advantage to EXSA members. And that's just 15,000. So your membership fee, I don't know how much your membership fee is, Leanne, I think it's about 7,000 Rand, or it depends on the category you've got. But that is a 15,000 of benefit and competitive advantage, which is huge. So this ruling is really a really, really great thing. Okay, so yeah, so we've gone through it, and Nigel, thanks for your input. I think it's very your input was very good, and I think one has to be very careful of. I think the biggest question here is enterprise. Is the enterprise, if it's from from a business which is not based in South Africa, then I think it's easy to decide. But the big question, and it's very easy it's black or white where the payment comes from. If it's rands from Dubai, it's rands from Dubai. If it's dollars from Dubai, it's dollars from Dubai. If you're an EXSA member, it's black or white. You're EXSA member. If it's the lessee using it, it's a black or white. And what we do in terms of we supply, it's black or white. So I think the only area of, how can I say, of debate and concern is the one of enterprise, and whether is it a South African enterprise or is it an international enterprise? And I mean, we had an incident quite recently where we're doing a stand now for Propack. It was paid by internationally, but we're charging VAT because the brief has actually come from a South African company. So even though it was paid internationally as part of the international marketing strategy, we actually charge, and you know what I'm talking about, Sue and Tumi, is that we actually charge VAT just because it was the brief came from a South African entity. Okay, any questions? Any further questions?
Morning, Justin. How are you doing?
Hi, Derek.
Yeah, just one quick question. You alluded to registration a little bit earlier. What would be your take on supplying registration services from international clients from a VAT ruling perspective?
So Derek, that's my take. And like I say, I'm not a consultant. I would say that it would be, if the payment was from overseas, the enterprise was from overseas, the brief was from overseas, you were an EXSA member or are an EXSA member, I would say it would be zero rated. And the reason why I say that, and like I say, I'm not an expert, and please don't sue me, Derek, when SARS rock up and said you should have charged VAT, and maybe you've got to ask your accountant. But for me is that you supply services to an exhibition, you don't rent out space, you also supply counters and registration counters. In my opinion, it would be exempt. The only part, Derek, which I would look at is there is a section in the Act about electronic goods. So there is a section, and I can go back to the presentation. Just got to be careful on that. So let's say you bring a whole lot of computers in, and it's electronic information. One just got to be careful of that part of it. So maybe you've got to split the invoice. But for the section supply, other than services contemplated 11.2 that are electronic services, shall be charged at VAT at a rate section 7.1. So Derek, I don't know if, so that, what are electronic services? And is any part of your business an electronic service? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, that's a bit open-ended. Yeah, like you say, define electronic services.
So I would imagine that that's a thing you need to look at, and only part of your element is electronic services, because a lot of the rest of the thing is physical registration, which you're giving to the organizers. So I would imagine that your thing would be zero rated. But I mean, I'd imagine that I think you should just, it's quite a gray area, as you can hear, in terms of what you do. But in my mind, it would catch, because you're operating in an exhibition environment, you're operating counters, physical stuff, you're taking information. So for me, it's a debate, but I would err on the side of zero rate. But I think get an opinion from your table the directive with your tax consultant and see what they think.
Okay, amazing. Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, I see your hand ups, Nigel. I don't know if it's from previous.
Yeah, Justin, on that question, I would the same as you said. The real thing is always get an opinion from your auditor.
Yeah.
Although they will give you an opinion which says, to the best of my knowledge, they will run to the hills if the poo hits the fan. Dare I say. But I think if it was a Malaysian financial company that's coming into the,
Sorry,
if it was
Nigel.
a Malaysian financial company coming into the country to do a roadshow on investment in Malaysia, I would say that it's an exhibition service, or it's a service. It's like an AV company, as long as you were a member of EXSA. But if you were, and I'm sorry, well, I'm looking at everybody's participation, but if I picked on Terrapin as an organizer, not picked on, but just put a name there. Terrapin is both a local organizer, their office is based overseas now, even the African office is in Middle East. It's an international across the world, but I would be wary not to charge VAT on a registration service to a Terrapin show or a specialized show, Montgomery. I think that it would be 50-50 if it would be allowed. But ask your auditor, ask your accountant. But if it was a Malaysian company coming in to do a roadshow on how to invest in Malaysia, I wouldn't charge, I would zero rate the VAT on those invoice.
So Nigel, just an example, and I don't want to mention the company's name, but we've done an event for an international organization for a long time. And we've done it for, let's say, 10 years. For the first 5 or 6 years, they never had an operation here. They came in, did the event and left. But then they opened a South African office, and we went back to them and said, hey, you've got an enterprise in South Africa, we're going to have to charge you VAT. So we actually had a change with this organizer because they were based, and it was an international service. It wasn't a service that was in South Africa. But they had a change in their nature, and as a result, we actually start charging VAT. So there was a change in the way they operated.
And I would agree, because VAT is not an expense. It's, I don't know what it is, cash flow issue. But it is a competitive advantage that EXSA does give to its members for service providers who are VAT registered, and most service providers at a certain level must be VAT registered. When you put in proposals, and because it does effectively, because internationally, for example, in the UK, it's very difficult to claim back the VAT on a service in a country. So it becomes an expense to that international company. They often can't claim it back. They can claim back products, but they can't claim back a service because it's deemed that they've consumed it. You know, you can't claim back your ice cream because you've eaten it. Yeah. But if you brought an ice cream maker, you can claim back the VAT on the ice cream maker type of effort. So I think it's always, you've got to, if you're trying to work around the VAT Act, it's probably illegal.
So Nigel, just an interesting thing, you know, you talk about international, you know, exhibitions. So we've done quite a lot of stands in the UK, and I've had different treatment from the UK. So I've had a situation, and so you know what I'm talking about, is we've had a situation where they've charged VAT to the stand builder, and we've had a situation where the stand builder hasn't charged VAT. So it's interesting, and that's what's really great about this directive. There's some clarity. We, in that case, would be a foreign enterprise because we've got nothing to do with, we were the enterprise, not the end user. We were the enterprise. We were getting the thing done overseas, and therefore we shouldn't have paid VAT in the South African scenario. So I have seen internationally, there's also not a consistency. And what's really great about this ruling, there's a level of consistency because at least it's specific to what we do.
I would agree. I think the ruling is very powerful because it's not now down to, can I say, somebody at a VAT office who makes a decision. If they're going to rule against it, they now know they have to rule against a ruling. They have to debate against the powers that be within the VAT organization. So that bit of paper is very powerful.
Agreed. So Derek, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sat here with a bit of a smile on my face thinking, well, you know, if I go to my accountant or tax expert and say to them, well, you know, this is the ruling from SARS, and as Nigel mentioned, you know, they will run and hide if anything goes wrong. Where does that leave me? So I don't think that really gives me any clarity. Is there clarity or a foolproof method of actually going directly to SARS and getting a ruling from them?
So Derek, this ruling took a lot of energy and effort. So I actually got our tax advisor, who I go to, even though I'm a high diploma in taxation, and there was a lot of cost involved. So, you know, I didn't pass it on to EXSA at the time, but it was a very long, slow process, and I went through the correct channels, and I went with a tax advisor. I went with a very experienced tax advisor to do it. So I'm just saying you could ask directly for a ruling. I just think it's going to cost a lot of money and a lot of time. So you could ask for a ruling. How long it will take, I don't know. And we were just very lucky that the person I went to had a lot of experience in this regard. And we also had a previous ruling, you know, which made a massive difference. So, you know, to ask an explanatory thing from SARS, I think it would take a long time. I think one can just go through the ruling and maybe look. I mean, an auditor should be able to give you better clarity. So the big thing here is your services. Are they, you know, is it electronic? Yes, no, because I think that's a block. And then you've got to say to yourselves, your services are related to exhibitions. So for me, I think it's fine. But I think, you know, Derek, I think your auditor will give you enough clarity, or your tax advisor will give you enough clarity to make a more informed decision.
Okay, thanks.
So I see Nigel's posted the original ruling was worked through ENS. Nigel, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was building on your thing, is that tax advice, if you're going to it, it can cost you a lot of money. This isn't, with respect, this is not a bookkeeper you have to go to. It's a proper tax advisor, because you could end up, if they come and assess you and go back after 5 years, you could end up with a multi-million rand bill. So I would always err on the side of caution if you're in doubt. And just because somebody else in the exhibition industry is zero rating it, if you think it's not appropriate, then you shouldn't be doing it. I know in the days when, particularly the organisers, before there was clarity within this ruling, some organisers charged VAT, other organisers zero rated it. I think there's some contractors who pay for the space on behalf of an international client, so because it's easier for the international client just to pay for one enterprise in South Africa. I would be wary of that, because that space should be VATable. The rest can be zero rated, but the space bill that you're paying.
Yeah, so I would agree with that, Nigel. I see Leanne, your hands up. I think we just lost Nigel there. Yeah, yes. Oh, it's my. I think
Thanks
it's
very much, Justin. Yes, I just wanted to say to Derek and anybody else here, if you have questions or you are feeling that you don't want to ask outright at the moment, the two people that probably use the VAT benefit most at EXSA are Justin, and the other one is Liam Beattie from Hot 3D. You're welcome to ask at any time, any questions that you have, and they can give you practical answers in terms of the way that it is done. So Derek, if you're having any questions or queries about what can or can not be done, those people are, and I see Liam isn't on here, he's in the meeting at the moment, but he uses the VAT benefit exceptionally well, and so does Justin. So they understand the workings of it. So if you are sitting in a situation, rather ask them together with your accountant than try and figure it out on yourself, for yourself. That's my 10 cents worth.
So Leanne, just to add on to what you said, I think Nigel's point is very valid, is that it's not just going, I mean, if I went to our auditor, I wouldn't actually rely on, and with respect to our auditors, I actually wouldn't rely on what they said, because they're good at putting the tax returns in and, you know, objecting here and there, but they actually don't have the knowledge or the understanding of what's required. So I would go, but there are auditors out there that do have a tax section or tax advice. So I would actually go to, rather than your accountant, and maybe that's a better, you know, that's what Nigel said, is actually go to a tax advisor. And that's what I would do. Because then it's just that you're going to get a better opinion. And I think often, you know, don't ask for a written opinion, because that's going to cost more. And the written opinion is going to take forever and it's going to cost you a lot. I think just a verbal opinion, you know, is good enough, because often, you know, the tax advisors out there are, it's easier to understand, and you can hear the mood in a better way if you are concerned. You know, next minute you've got an opinion, and then the next minute who knows what. So I think that, and it costs a lot of money, opinion. So I would rather go to a tax advisor, let him have a look at it, and then actually make a decision on that accordingly. I think that's a good way.
My thoughts on it, Justin, because you've scared me now, is that you know, look to see whether there's a competitive advantage in giving a 0 rating VAT application, and if there isn't, then charge VAT. Agreed.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, so a lot of, I mean, imagine a lot of your clients are South African based or whatever, that, you know, doesn't make a difference. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few international, you know, SAFEX and what have you, they're international, but you know, I do it as a matter of course, actually, on international clients. But I'm thinking now, well, if I'm carrying that risk for the next 5 years, and I'm sort of offering it up, you know, having already secured the contract, then I probably shouldn't offer it up and charge them VAT.
Yeah. Thanks for your questions, Derek, and Nigel, your input, because it's actually through debate that we really often understand how things should work.
Yeah, no, thanks, guys. Yeah, very valuable. Thanks.
Thanks.
I don't know where that leaves me, but
just a question, and I don't know if this is at all valid, but the EXSA membership aspect of getting this ruling, is that a year-on-year membership, or does it have to be a continuous membership for the entire duration of the ruling? Was it only the year that you use it in?
I've been taking it as a year-on-year ruling, Doug. So it is for that year that we send through the list of members, and then the following year we have to resubmit the list. So it's year-on-year exactly who is a member or not. So it's not over the full 5 years. It's SARS asks for yearly numbers and names of members that can benefit from the ruling.
Okay,
and
so here's a scenario.
Spin on it.
Here's a scenario that somebody in September of a year asks for membership, which would be for like 3 months or something. Does that qualify them to claim on this if they do something within the September month of the year and then they don't renew the following?
No, because it hadn't been submitted. We don't submit on a month-on-month basis. We submit once a year. If it is within perhaps March, April that they renew their membership, even up to those who have done it in June, July, we have then submitted a second list. But inevitably it is members, because membership runs from the 1st of Jan to the end of December. Most times we submit straight after the AGM, where there is board members involved, what the structure of EXSA is and who the members are at that time. So if it is quite a lot of members, like last year, I sent through again because there were a lot of members that joined in the June month, then it was fine. But if they joined December, November, or anything like that for 3 months or so, then no, it doesn't go through to SARS at all. I don't think it's, I think it's only benefits the members if they are on a yearly basis.
Thank you, Leanne.
Leanne, I would say it would be at the time of invoicing.
Agreed.
So if you're a member at the time if you invoiced on the 28th of February and you were a member, it would be 0 rated. If you invoiced on the 1st of March and you were, sorry, because EXSA's membership is from January to December. So if you invoiced on the 31st of December, it would be 0 rated. But if you invoiced on the 1st of January because you've got nothing better to do, then you were no longer a member, had not renewed your membership, even if you renewed the membership in February, I would be wary of 0 rating.
I agree with you, Nigel, but we're not living in ordinary times where people are able to register at the end of December.
Leanne, I agree, but the VAT man is a very black and white guy, if I can use that expression.
Yeah, but even the
there is
VAT
no
guard,
grey area.
yes, but even the VAT guard is saying as soon as it has been from AGM, which usually runs, we have till the end of March to run our AGM, it's acceptable to them because they also understand that the industry has been so decimated that they will accept the members at that time. So I think that we are trying to do our best service as possible to our members, Leanne, at all times.
Yeah, it's not a criticism, EXSA. It's more of a, you know, if, for example, you invoice for a stand now and you would still have considered a member of EXSA now, but the build was actually in April and you didn't renew your membership, I would be wary. Yes. And I think there was a comment of somebody's that actually 15% of 60, you know, the membership is a project value of 60-odd thousand rand. So if you're building stands of more than 60,000 rand for international clients or providing services, actually it would make sense to be a member. Absolutely. In order to 0 rate. And I would agree 100% with that. It's not like, oh, there's a tender and you've got to be a member of EXSA on the date of tendering. It's a little bit more complex than that.
Yes, I hear you, Nigel, and I agree with you. And that's why I say we made an exception last year and SARS made an exception due to the pandemic and the complete lack of work. But this year, the list will go in at AGM, and that will be the list for the year because businesses are opening. And we also want to make sure that those members that renewed for the 1st of January reach their benefit of early renewal and sticking to the rules and so forth. So we are very cognizant of that. But again, as I said, our members are always at the forefront of how we do things and what we do, especially over the last 2 years. We've all been living in difficult situations. So we try and do the best we can for our members. Doug did have a hand up. Has anybody else got any questions to ask? Okay, then from our side, thank you very much for joining this morning. It's been very informative. Justin, I can't thank you enough for your information and input. And I'm going to hand back over to Sibusiso for his closing. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Leanne. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the questions that we had. It's really great. And it's very true that through debate, we actually learn a bit more. So let's not be afraid to debate. Let's not be afraid to talk. Let's always just respect each other's time and respect each other's comments. Thank you very much, Justin, for being able to be part of this session. It was very informative, and I'm sure the people that are going to be watching later on will be very informed. I must say that I'm also taking the VAT ruling. I'm also using the VAT ruling in some of my clients, and I'm very happy about it. This is a very big selling point, and to many more EXSA Connects that we're going to be hosting. We will be reminding people of this. This is one of our biggest draw cards. So thank you very much to the very first people who initiated this VAT ruling, and we definitely will be keeping an eye to make sure that we apply in time. We definitely do not want to lose this VAT ruling. Thank you very much to everyone that's come through, that's taken their time. It was really great. Thank you very much.